So, Jonathan, firstly, a massive warm welcome to the Legal Brew.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, from the get-go, you are a partner, a corporate partner at Bird and Bird, and you've recently started there. But what we're going to do today, and thank you so much, firstly, for sparing the time to come on and talk to me. There's a lot I want to talk to you about because I think that this conversation is hopefully going to help a lot of people and shed some light on perhaps some of the mysteries of how one gets to partnership. But to start from the beginning, tell me a bit about your journey to becoming a partner and how you've got to where you are.
Okay. I guess the short answer is probably more by luck than judgment in terms of how I've got here. But um, so I studied law at university, um, hated it. Studying law, it was very academic, very dry, and not the sort of thing that I enjoyed. Um, and I then did a little bit of work experience at a tiny high street firm in Cambridge, which is where I grew up, not where I went to university, and decided I really liked that as the practice of law. And I thought I would go and do my training contract or articles as they were at the time, because I'm that old, at a firm in London. And my plan was then to move back to Cambridge, moved back to the provinces, as London dismissively labels everything outside of London. Um, and so I applied for a training contract. I was fortunate enough to get an offer from a number of firms. It was definitely much easier back then to get an offer of a training contract, and I joined Ashurst Morris Crisp, or Ashurst as it is now, as a trainee. Um, thoroughly enjoyed my time there as a trainee and associate and partner. Qualified, as you said, with a spoiler alert at the beginning, into the corporate group, and we can perhaps talk in due course about why corporate for me. Um, at the time, Ashurst was phenomenally strong in private equity, and I was part of the private equity team, and spent the best part of 20 years at Ashurst, and then moved, wanting to try something different, to Deckert, a US firm, but their London office, um, working there, and worked quite closely with a lot of people in the funds team, another strong suit of Deckert, um, aligning myself with strong practice groups and practice areas of the firm that I was at. And then, as you say, I've just recently, a couple of months ago, joined Bird and Bird, and I'm part of the corporate team there. I'm very much enjoying my third sort of legal career.
Mm. How did you find sort of the transition between going from Ashurst to Decker and the sort of differences between the firms? Because you stayed at both firms for, a fair amount of time as well.
Yes. I think both are great firms, and I really enjoyed my time there. There is undoubtedly a difference between every firm. I've worked at three firms, and they're all very different. Um, I think the risk, of course, is sweeping generalizations about UK versus US firms in terms of it. I think what I would say, one of the things that struck me most about the approach from Deckert when I joined, um, as a Brit, we sort of look at Americans, and they're obsessed with baseball, and they can recite sort of players' career stats, which mean nothing to me. They're sort of at bat average and all this stuff. And American lawyers have that same sort of obsession with lawyers' stats and performance, and that's something obviously that has filtered across to UK firms during my career in London, and I think part of it, a lot of that is a good thing, a transition from sort of um, probably before my time, even of probably a gentleman's club, and using that quite deliberately because it probably was far more a gentleman's club sort of set up to becoming a business. And obviously in terms of business, you are looking at performance and profitability in terms of that. But I think the Americans were there um, in a much more focused way, and a much more open way earlier than UK firms. And I think that's one of the, the biggest differences. I think from a UK firm, um, as a generalization, they think about other things beyond sort of chargeable time and billings, whereas from a US perspective, the billings and the hours are far more a prime factor.
A focus to sort of judge one's performance, sort of, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, how many years PQE was you when you became a partner?
I was just coming up to, I was 7.5, I think. No, I was 8.5 when I became a partner because of the timing of qualification and UK firms year end and when they made up partner, um,
Which
which
is
is quite
quite.
early
It is quite
nowadays.
early. Especially for in the city and in the US. How how did you get to partner? Was that something you were striving to do from being sort of a baby lawyer as such?
Yeah, and it was, and I think um, nowadays that there are far more options that are open to people, and far more junior lawyers come into the profession not set on the path to partnership, and I think that's a real positive in terms of things. I think when I joined, and I think it was partly me that I was focused on partnership and driven to achieving that. But I think it was also very much sort of the done thing. There weren't as many sort of alternatives of in-house roles. There wasn't as much movement between law firms. Um, Amongst even the associate ranks, and certainly not among the partner ranks, as I was coming through. So, yeah, I was always very focused on chasing that partnership reward in terms of it, and that's not necessarily financial. It was um, it meant something. It was an achievement to get there, and I
Mm.
think it's still the case now, and I think this is why people look at alternative careers. And I think you're right in what you said, that the timetable for people to get to partner has gone out from, and it takes a lot longer now in general terms to make partner. And whilst different law firms come up with different titles, senior associate, director, counsel, whatever, effectively, there aren't many rungs along the ladder from qualifying to partner, and yet there's a huge step or series, many flights of steps to get from one place to the other, and so that can be quite daunting, I think, as people look
Mm.
at it in terms of how do they get to the next level. Um, so that I think was always a challenge, but was always something that I was focused on.
What do you attribute in yourself now, looking back, to getting to partnership at what was quite a young age? What was it about you that made you get there?
I don't know. I'm probably the wrong person to ask. You should probably talk to the people who
Powers
were
that be.
partners at Ashurst at the time. But I mean, from my perspective, I think my focus was very much on um, learning the job in the early years, being um, a good technical lawyer. So understanding the law, building that sort of foundation of legal knowledge. Um, but one of the advantages of being a corporate lawyer, in general terms, doing corporate and M&A work, is the law is there, but is a little bit more in the background than in some other legal disciplines. And so the next layer to build on is that commercial know-how. And I remember as a junior lawyer being told by one of the partners, look, there's no substitute for experience, and being really frustrated by that and thinking, but I want to know it now. And it's only in hindsight that you recognize that and appreciate that they're right. You know, we all try, all corporate lawyers are trying to be that trusted legal advisor, and to do that you need the commercial know-how. And it's not that you've seen everything and you've done everything, but it's having seen enough to know how to apply business skills and commercial skills to something. So it was then doing that, and building that onto it, which you only do by getting the experience, by doing deals, by repeating the tasks, by pushing yourself and expanding. So there was an awful lot, and there remains an awful lot of hard work and effort involved in becoming a partner. And then um, obviously building on top of that is building relationships with clients and contacts is clearly key. Are you someone who's going to help the firm build their practice, build their presence, build their client base, build profitability? So that's really key. But undoubtedly a key part as well is luck, being right place at the right time in the right practice, um, to tick enough of the boxes, or to fool enough of the people for enough of the time to get beyond that partnership finishing line.
Do you know what? I think you create your own luck, and I think you've put yourself in the right place at the right
Well,
time and done the right things. But there is an element of timing. I appreciate
oh
that.
yes.
You mentioned obviously clients and building a practice, which you've done very, very successfully. How have you sort of done that over the years? And I guess the reason I'm asking that is a lot of people out there, know the importance now more than ever of one, building a client base, and two, always keeping an eye on the commercials. Tell me a bit about your experience of building your client base and how that's sort of developed and changed over the years, as because I'm sure that, since you've become a partner and built that, the world has changed a lot. How have you kept up with that?
Oh, totally. So I mean, you're absolutely right, and I think every law firm that I've been at, and it's become more sophisticated over time, have encouraged people from a junior level upwards to build and maintain their client base. And it's so important at a junior level that you make those connections and keep and build those connections, because those people who are juniors at clients are going to go on and become CEOs, managing directors, and are going to be the clients of the future. So it's very important to do that. Um, some people have built, come with a ready-made network from sort of, you know, in some cases, family background. One of the things that law is trying to break down with social mobility, some of them with contacts that they build at university. But in my case, most of mine was built through working with people at the time and looking to build that. And it there's unfortunately there's no single formula, or at least none that I've come up with for success. I think what I would say is I think as a corporate lawyer, I think there are very few partners who are successful purely by virtue of being known to be good at the law, because there are so
Mm.
many corporate partners out there who are good at the law. So you have to offer something else in terms of that. And it is making that personal connection, and it is being someone that clients will trust. And I think from my perspective, a lot of that started from doing the deals well, responding to clients. It's quite funny. I was talking to someone um, last week who'd been on a secondment, and I said, what was the key thing that they'd learned about their time on secondment, and what made lawyers stand out? And they were saying it's responsiveness. It is, responding to an email within 15 minutes of getting it from a client saying yes, we're on it, and doing it. If you don't do that, that's what irritates clients. That's what makes them think you haven't got it, you haven't got their back. And I suppose to give a couple of illustrations, a couple of examples. So when I first became a partner, I did a deal for a client, and I arranged a lunch to meet up with one of the key individuals, and he said to me at the lunch, he said, "Well, I feel a bit of a fraud being here because I've just accepted redundancy from the client."
Mm.
And I said, "No, no, that's okay." Thinking, oh, that's not really good. He said, "So I'm thinking of setting up my own business." And I said, "Well, what a coincidence." I said, I think I can help you with that." And I helped that client set up a business, do some fundraising for that business, and um, about 2 years later, they sold that business and made a very tidy sum. And the next week, I set up another business for that client, for that individual. And I have acted for that individual in one capacity or another for about 22 years, including with that second business he set up. Um, it went through a series of acquisitions. It then listed on the London Stock Exchange. It was in the FTSE 100. He's then left and is embarking on other ventures. And so again, there's an element of luck in terms of that, but following up with that individual and having that is one example. Um, and another example, I'm keeping it anonymous in terms of clients. There was an historic client at Deckert that Deckert had done a lot of work for in terms of IP and contentious work, not really done any corporate work because there hadn't been much corporate activity.
Mhm.
And I was then instructed to advise that business on its sale. It was a family-owned business, um, and worked for that business for 2 years in the build-up to that sale, and have since, with the family, worked for them on a number of different acquisitions as well. But they also introduced me to another business and another client that was looking to do
Mm.
another deal. And their introduction, it was really flattering, and I still pay them a monthly retainer for it. But the original client said, you know, towards the end of the process, you need a lawyer who is going to be fighting your corner and delivering the best deal for you. And some of the intermediaries and other advisors will be just wanting to get the deal done and focusing
Mm.
on their fee. And you want the lawyer to be, battling for you. And Jonathan is the person to do that. And so it's that. But I think a lot of it, Jason, you have to flex your style to fit the client, because some clients want a regular update, want you to sort of have a chat with them every week for sort of 5-10 minutes as to what's happening. Others want you to leave them alone between deals. They
Mm.
know where you are, they'll come back to you. Some of them like to receive messages in different ways. Some of them want and I remember another client saying to me that they had some really complex antitrust issues. And they said, I want an email, no more than 2 lines of text telling me the answer. And there are some clients who do just tell me the answer, just get the deal done. There are some clients who want that that
The full
analysis and
textbook,
want
the
to
full
understand it.
breakdown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got to flex your style for the client to fit them. The challenge is finding out what that client wants and how they want it, and that comes from sort of talking to them about the service that you're providing, whether it's what they want, if there are things that can be improved in terms of it.
Mm. One thing I really took away from when I spoke to you when we were talking before coming onto this to get to sort of thrash things out a bit, Jonathan, was your ability to be somewhat of a chameleon and sort of fit in and suit, the firm, the practice, the client. That seems like it's something that, is definitely made you very successful, is your ability to fit wherever you are.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think you do with clients as a junior, and the training contract is a really good introduction to that, because you have, you know 4 different supervisors in terms of it, who will all operate in a different way, and I think you learn then how they want something presented. Uh, do you need to be quiet? When's the right time to have a chat? You've got to learn and flex your own style in terms of that, and that applies to interactions with clients. um, my general advice is always, it's far better to speak to people than email or anything of that nature, because um, I, as a partner, you get copied in on lots of email correspondence, and you can see
Mm.
2 people, and they might be at your firm, or they might be at, opposing firms, and they're arguing with each other on email, but you can read between the lines and see, actually, you're agreeing. So talking is really important in that sense, but also, yes, in terms of practice, I would say I'm a sort of very much a generalist corporate M&A lawyer. I was always brought up to sort of have a can-do attitude and say, yes, I can do this. And I think it's a really important skill for junior people to learn, not to become too blinkered, too
Mm.
narrow focused in terms of it, because we all encounter different things. And even at my stage, I learn something new every day in terms of it. And I think, you have to think, I've got transferable skills. I might not have done this before, but I've got something I've done over there that I can apply and learn and deal with. And I think if you become too narrow focused, you possibly miss out on trends in the market and the way the market has developed over time. And you know, being a generalist corporate M&A lawyer is the perfect example of that. Whether you're doing something that's in the energy field, that's in life sciences, that's in automotive, that's in financial services, being able to flex your style and adapt to that is very important. So I think that's a to my mind that's been something that I've always really defended my right to be a generalist and to cover
Mm.
multiple different areas. And again, whether it's private equity work, whether it's public company work, private M&A, I think it's very important to be able to cover the full spectrum. So again, as an example, private equity um, invest in a business and they're going to exit. Now, the popular trend is by way of a sale as opposed to an IPO, but there is certainly still theoretically, and there are also examples of exits by way of IPO. And you want to see that client, that portfolio company through that journey and be able to
Mm.
handle that. But also on the way in, there's going to be some provisions that cover an IPO. And again, I can remember a deal with a law firm that is known for private equity work, and I wanted to put some language in about preparing for an IPO, and they said, "Well, we'll have to check with our equity capital markets team because I don't know that." And I was kind of, but how can
Mm.
you advise on private equity without knowing enough to be dangerous about IPOs
Yeah.
and public company side? And I think that's all part. It's a different aspect of the same thing of being able to flex your style and as you say, be a chameleon.
That's interesting. You obviously touched on a moment ago about kind of trainees, people in the industry who are sort of just coming in. And I know that's a massive passion of yours, developing
Yes.
junior lawyers. So I guess I want to sort of come back because you rightly said earlier that it was easier back then. It's a very different
Yes.
place now. So as a mentor yourself to trainees and associates, what are kind of some of the key skills that you believe are essential these days, given the fact that people aren't staying in their roles maybe as long? How what have you kind of seen and what's been your experiences?
So I think the absolute key as a trainee and a junior associate is to be yourself, because you've got, even on a vacation scheme, you've got to a vacation scheme, you've got to a training contract, you've qualified. The reason you've got to that is because the recruiters at the law firm have liked what they've seen in you. They've thought there's something there, there's potential.
Mm.
So so be yourself, but be the best version of yourself in terms of it. It's kind of um, you have to be conscious and treat of the fact that everybody, it, it, your supervisor, the partners are all sort of observing you in that sense as a trainee, and are going to give feedback on you as a junior, and so it's wanting and it's finding that drive, that desire to always be the best version of yourself. um, the other things that I think are so important is um, to, to volunteer, to be enthusiastic. You don't sit at the back of the bus. You need to
Yeah.
be there saying yes. You know, put your hand up and say, "Yeah, can I help? Can I do
Don't
this?"
be coy and shy at the back of the classroom. It's the time to
Exactly.
have your hand up, Jonathan.
Absolutely. The whole and that's part of being the best version of yourself is doing that. Get involved, get engaged, because you're going to learn, you're going to develop by doing things, by learning more. It's that cliche of that ripple in a pool. As the ripple spreads outwards, the more you learn, but the more you realize you still have to learn as you go around the circumference of that ripple spreading outwards. And be hungry, be enthusiastic about finding out about that. Don't be scared about making mistakes. I always remember, um, uh, uh, when I went to law school, we had to do ethics at the time in terms of it as a um, separate study area. And the lecturer who actually I kept in touch with for 20 something years after I left and until he retired, he said, "So I'm often asked, when is a solicitor negligent?" And he said, "In my experience, the average is once or twice a week." And and people get to a point where they're so frightened to make mistakes, they get analysis paralysis. And I think you are provided as a junior with so many layers of support, and it's always possible to ask questions, but don't be afraid to volunteer in thinking, what if I get it wrong? Because the key thing, we all make mistakes, we're all human, is as much anything, how do you address that, how do you learn from it, and sorting out the mistake before it becomes too big a problem. So I think it's that sort of attitude as much as anything else that counts for so much. And it really does, having been sort of the training principal at Deckard for about 10 years, and having seen so many trainees come through the system, at Ashurst and Deckard, and also now at Bird and Bird. What makes people stand out is that enthusiasm, that positive mental attitude, that happy demeanor, that drive to
Mm.
learn in terms of things.
It's interesting you say that, because maybe what a trainee might think a partner like you, Jonathan, if it's going to impress you, is their legal expertise and how technical they are. And I guess it's more, I guess a lot of the time it's more about their personality, not
It
about
is,
being the biggest book
yeah,
smart person.
yeah, because and it may be that it's again sort of particular to corporate law, whereas I say the law is more in the background. It is still there, but um, it is that demeanor, that character that makes a real difference. And to give again another example, there was a vacation scheme student, um, who I asked if they could help with something, and it was very much only if they had time. They were with another supervisor who was keeping them busy. And talking to the vacation scheme student afterwards, they said, "I am not leaving here without doing that piece of work for Jonathan, because I'm not finishing the vacation scheme and going away thinking, oh, if only I'd done this." And that drive absolutely made the vacation scheme students stand out. And I'm delighted to say, we offered that person a training contract at Deckard. They
Oh, I love
qualified.
that.
They're now
That's so
3 years
nice. Mm.
qualified, and I'm and they impress me every single day. And it's they are the individual is an excellent lawyer, but it's their drive and commitment and
Mm.
personality and desire to learn that really makes them stand out. And it's that they're also that they do ask questions. They do, it's fine to ask questions. Nobody thinks a trainee or a junior lawyer is going to know everything. But what's important in doing that is to have done a bit of thinking beforehand.
Mm.
Don't use a partner as the legal textbook or legal research. It's not that
Yes.
you need to come thinking, well, I've looked at this, and this is what I think we should do. Am I right? Is this how this section works, or is this how we would do things,
Yeah,
rather
not
than just
just
saying,
coming to the partner straight away, having
yeah,
looked into it, come up maybe with your own ideas,
yeah,
because then it's a learning exercise rather than let's just go get the answers from
exactly.
Jonathan.
Because
Yeah.
what happens if somebody just says, I don't know, I'm stuck, what do I do? Is you would always say, well, what do you think we should do? What would you suggest? You know, if I was the client, what would you suggest? And I'm very happy to guide people through, but you want them to have thought about the issue
Mm.
before, to 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 be ready to discuss it.
I think what you're saying, there's so much value in what you've just said there, because I think people starting out in their career could, learn a thing or two about that. Do you think universities do enough to prepare people for what it's like in the real world?
From my experience, going back a long time,
Yes.
no, is very much the answer. From my personal experience, no, because it was um, very. I mean, it was, looking back now, it was important because it's that building block. It's that core of legal knowledge, but there was less of the practical application. Now, I think we're going through, you know, LPC to SQE now, and I think um, jury's still out generally a little bit about SQE and how that's going to work over time. I think, speaking as a sort of city lawyer, and the city LPC, I think did an awful lot more than I had in terms of preparing people for the practical solutions. But it's but I think there's still more. But I think a lot of that comes down to the individual. It's that sort of, you know, it's that heads up, it's that look around, it's that think about the
Mm.
the implications, think about the bigger picture, as opposed to sort of, you know, head down. And people, you know, you get people who come to you and say, I've been arguing as to whether we include material in this warranty or this clause, and you're kind of, okay. Or, you know, whether we use reasonable endeavors or all reasonable endeavors or best endeavors, and there can be a right answer in a particular context, but actually, if you take it and look at the overall scheme of things, you know, how many times is there a warranty claim? Very few and far between. How often does it turn on the inclusion of the word material or not? Not that often. So it's having that sort of broader perspective, and I think a lot of that comes to the individual, because with everything you can show people the way to do things, but it's up to them to implement it.
Mm. I can really sense your passion for training people and developing people. It really comes across. I like that. So, moving on then to
Yes.
the legal landscape, which is constantly evolving. And what was going through my mind when you was talking there about resource was when you started, Jonathan, probably the only resource was a library. We are in
Yes.
a world now where, when you trained, this wasn't even a thing, Zoom. So there's a lot more resource out
I
there
was Fat
generally.
Larry's band. It was a great song. That was what Zoom was.
So, obviously, the legal landscape constantly evolving, especially in response to all the technological advancements that we have. How do you stay up to date with the world, innovation, everything that's going on to make sure your clients are getting the most up to date, advice? How are you keeping up with the world we live in now, Jonathan?
It's a struggle, and as technology advances more and more quickly, and you know, no soon no sooner have you done an upgrade on your iPhone than there's another upgrade that you need to do. So it's a constant process, and that's why continuing legal education is so important. So um, it it's an ongoing process in terms of legal developments. Um, I spend sort of probably an hour, 2 hours a week, keeping up to date with changes in law, changes in practice that are relevant to my clients, my field of work. Um, One of the challenges as a corporate lawyer, you need to know a little bit about everything. So you need to know bits of employment law, bits of land law, bits of pensions law, bits of IP, and as my colleagues who are experts in those fields would say, I at best I know enough to be dangerous in those areas. So there's constant evolution in terms of law and practice, and that is relatively easy to do because the availability of updates from different resources um, is plentiful. So actually, the only challenge is filtering out what's relevant and what isn't from a legal
Mm.
perspective. Technology, I mean, you're absolutely right. The biggest change during my career has been technology and the advances in technology. Um, and as I say, it seems that it's picking up pace more and more in terms of that. Um, I'm fortunate that we have at the firms I've been at, we have teams of experts who and associates who are far more technologically minded. Generation Y. Um, and Generation Z, who are far more sort of attuned to what's happening, and children who can
Yes.
who can help in that respect. But um, it, it is a challenge. But the whole purpose of it is not technology and technological advancements for the sake of it. The key thing to work out, I think, is how is this going to help me and the team I'm working with do do our job better, more efficiently, more effectively, and therefore how is it going to help the client and provide a better service, whether that's a, a more efficient service, a more cost-effective service, whatever it may be. How is that going to help them? And again, it seems to me that there is so much innovation. There are so many new products that are coming to market the whole and becoming available the whole time. Um, and you have to work out what is right for the particular transaction, the particular task. But it's all driven by how is that going to help the client.
Mm.
And so I think understanding it can be a real selling point for clients. Some of it in terms of um, AI that we're seeing, the ability to sort of assist with due diligence, for example, but it's an aid rather than a substitute
Yes.
in that respect. So I think it's understanding it and understanding how it can best help in terms of it.
It's interesting. I wanted to ask you, with your extensive experience in private equity, could you share some insights about current trends, developments that are shaping the private equity landscape, and how you anticipate that these trends might influence deal making strategies in the future?
Yeah. So
I'm asking you everything today, Jonathan. I've got so
this,
many questions. We are
gosh,
coming to an end soon, but I couldn't not ask you about that.
so private equity. So I think the first thing for people, I would say, I always describe private equity clients as being like one of my sisters. Um, my sister, whenever she checks into a hotel somewhere, She puts her bags in the room, and then she straight away goes and looks to see where are the fire exits. And private equity is exactly the same. They don't go into an investment without understanding where the exits are. And that's always been the case in terms of them. One of the things that's changed is the time frame that they will hold investments for has changed very much, partly as a result of changes in law and regulation. But it's also, I think historically, they used to put in leverage, so debt finance into a business, and that was the tool to generate value in many ways in terms of it. Now, I think they are looking for businesses where they can add value, businesses that have growth potential, businesses where they can help deliver that. And leverage is a function of their transaction and the way in which they work. But that that ability to get a really quick turnaround and a really fantastic exit is few and far between, and is getting further between them. So it is identifying the potential and recognizing that there is hard work and effort on their part, and there's a need for them to add their expertise and their value to the business to help them grow and develop. I think that's one of the important factors in terms of it. The other thing that I think has happened is from a lawyer's perspective, I think private equity clients had and still do have loyalty to particular firms, particular individuals at firms, but I think they used to be relatively agnostic as to whether their firm had particular expertise in the sector that they were investing in. And
Right.
partly it may be historically that some of the sectors they were investing in were themselves fairly general in terms of it. You look at private equity firms now, and they are very sector focused. They do still have sort of, again, damned by generalization, they do still have sort of retail and consumer as a sort of core sector, a typical private equity firm. But that's not a hot sector at the moment. Undoubtedly, hot sectors at the moment are technology, financial services, and they're becoming much more sophisticated in terms of who they use as advisors on particular transactions, and far more willing to use a pool of law firms who can provide that sector expertise to add value to them and to their transaction and their portfolio company. And I think that's one of the trends that's happening. And it is, of course, coincidence that one of the sectors I specialize in is financial services, and
What a coincidence that is.
I've joined Bird and Bird, which has a market-leading reputation in all things tech.
Well, you've actually kind of led on to my next and last question very well. So it's an exciting time for you. You've just embarked on a new challenge with Bird and Bird. Tell us about your aspirations there and what you're doing in the corporate team. And I guess, how do you envision leveraging your expertise and client base to continue to build on the success at Bird and Bird?
Gosh, yeah, it's a big
This
big
isn't a job
question.
interview. I promise you, I haven't been put up to this, Jonathan.
No, it's a good question. It's a big question. Well, I mean, as you know, Jason, others may not. Bird and Bird has announced a sort of 5-year plan in terms of its growth, and targeting by 2029 becoming a €1 billion business in terms of what it's doing. So looking at growing the practice globally and across all legal disciplines and sectors. So from that perspective, it's very exciting to be at a firm that has ambition, that is looking to grow. And from the corporate group in particular, we recognize that there is work to be done to get to where we want to be. We are actually quite a long way down the road. Some of the work that we're doing that you, you learn quite a lot about a firm from the outside, but it's nothing compared to what you
Yeah.
learn once you're on the inside. And in the 2 months that I've been at Bird and Bird, the knowledge that I've gained about um, the work that they do, the expertise that they have in terms of it, and it makes it a very, for me certainly, personally, a very exciting and a very energizing place to be in terms of a firm that has that ambition, that has that growth plan. And for me, my objective is to help in whatever way I can to assist with that growth, that ambition. So it presents a huge opportunity for me and for everyone at the firm. Um, and that opportunity is very real, very tangible. Of course, it's a separate question as to whether we realize collectively and individually that opportunity. But there's certainly the ambition and the collective desire to do that. So from my perspective, that that's why I joined Bird and Bird, and that's why I'm loving being there.
Well, Jonathan, I just want to say sincerely all the best of luck and best wishes at Birds and Birds. And thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for coming on to this and doing this, because you probably don't realize probably the amount of value it's going to add to people, because to you it's just talking through your experiences, but I think there was so many amazing, most wonderful points you made there which I think will help a lot of people. So thank you for
A
coming on to the
pleasure.
Legal Brew.
Thank you for inviting me.